Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullum, and today I'm up here in Canada visiting Marstar and taking a look at a number of interesting firearms they have in their reference collection, and one of them is this vz61 Skorpion machine pistol. Now, there aren't a whole lot of true machine pistols out there. Most of what's out there are pistols that were then later retrofitted to become full auto, or to have full auto variants. And the most classic example of that is the C96 Mauser becoming, in the 1930s, the Schnellfeuer automatic pistol. Well, the VZ61 here is a true from-the-ground-up machine pistol, and that makes it a really interesting gun. So, a few basic statistics to start off with. This fires at about 850 rounds a minute. It uses the 32 ACP cartridge in 20-round and 10-round magazines. These were developed in the late 1950s. Prototypes were built in 1959 and then adopted by the Czech military in 1961. Now, why 32 ACP? That's one of the first questions that often gets asked. The answer is 32 ACP is conducive to a machine pistol. In order to make this something that's actually more useful than a true submachine gun, it has to be very compact. If it gets much bigger than this, well, you might as well carry a submachine gun and have all the benefits that that offers. A small cartridge like 32 ACP makes a small gun more practical. In addition, 32 ACP was a caliber in standard usage by the Czech government or the Czech armed forces at the time, so it made sense. Later on, this gun would be adapted to a number of other calibers, including 380 and 9mm Makarov. But the originals were 32 ACP. And that's why we have the curved magazine as well, is to accommodate the semi-rimmed cartridge of the 32. So the next question that comes up, or should come up, is what's the point? Why do you have a machine pistol? And if you're going to design one, it's important to figure out exactly what it's going to be used for first, and then design it around those criteria. Well, in the case of the Skorpion, the purpose was to have a personal defense weapon, especially for like armored vehicle crews. Guys who needed some sort of weapon in case they had to evacuate their tank or their APC, but they didn't have room in an armored vehicle for a full-size rifle, or necessarily even for a submachine gun. But they wanted to have more firepower on hand than just a standard sidearm, a service pistol. So that's actually one of the relatively few good reasons to have a machine pistol. And that's what this was designed specifically for. So we have the small cartridge, we have a compact overall size, the stock folds up very compact over the front of the gun, and it comes with, see if I can stand that up there, there we go. It was issued with an actual belt holster. Now, a lot of machine pistols, especially historical ones, have holsters that double as shoulder stocks to kind of kill two birds with one stone. The Schnellfeuer is the classic original example of that. And then, of course, there are things like the Russian Stechkin, which also have shoulder stock holsters. The problem with a shoulder stock holster is they tend to be a little bit fragile because they have to be made out of some hard shell material that will retain its shape so that you can use it as a stock, but they also have to be hollow to hold the gun. And you end up with stock designs that are liable to cracking or breaking. Well, the Czechs ignored that. They went with just a plain belt holster, and that also, by the way, is why these have 10-round magazines, because with the 10-round magazine, this thing slides nicely into its holster like that. Now, this is pretty huge for a pistol holster, but this is substantially smaller than a submachine gun. And you can, in fact, practically wear this on your belt, as in you can, in a practical manner, just wear that on your belt, and it doesn't take up very much space at all. It can be drawn fairly quickly, put into action with the shoulder stock or without, and you have a gun with a substantial amount of firepower. It may be using a small cartridge, but at 850 rounds, it puts out a lot of cartridges. Now, this is actually kind of a different answer to the same question that led to the M1 carbine. The M1 carbine was not necessarily for troops in armored vehicles, but it was for support type troops who didn't want to carry around an M1 Garand, but needed more than a 1911 pistol. So they came up with this intermediate-sized carbine that was light and handy to carry. Well, if you take that same requirement and emphasize the size and the lightness even more, at the expense of ballistic capability, you end up with something like a Skorpion. To consider the purpose of this, we can compare it to the M1 carbine. We can also compare it to the Stechkin. The Stechkin is very similar to this in size. It's a little more powerful with the 9x18 Makarov cartridge. We could also compare this to the HK MP7, and we could compare it to the FN P90. Now the P90 is a little bit more like the M1 carbine. It's a little more of a submachine gun or carbine style of weapon. The MP7 is maybe a little closer to this. The Stechkin is very close in general form to this, although with the magazine in the grip. These are all a single family of guns, and that's kind of what the personal defense weapon encompasses. Something more than a pistol, but less than a carbine or submachine gun. Now, there's a lot going on inside this gun, a lot more than you might expect. This is not just some simple blowback open bolt thing. So, let's take this apart and look at the mechanism. We don't have a whole lot in the way of markings to show you on these things. They're not marked vz61 or Skorpion anywhere, but there is a factory mark and a date of production here on the bottom of the magazine well. This is a 1975 production, and we have a Cross Swords approval stamp down here. Just for comparison's sake, here's another example. This is a 1963 production, so 2-year date stamp there, and that military approval mark. And then you're also going to have the serial number on the upper receiver right there. Now, taking a look at controls, we can see that this really is built as a submachine gun in pistol size, unlike a lot of machine pistols, which are pistols that are adapted to full auto. So if you look at the controls, obviously the magazine is sitting here outside of the grip to allow a more submachine gun-like bolt instead of having a reciprocating slide on top. We have a magazine release button here, just like a typical long gun. We have a safety selector back here. It's marked 20 for full auto, and then the middle position is safe, 0, and the rearward position is 1, semi-auto. In the interests of compactness, our bolt handles are actually these 2 little nubs on the side of the action, and so you grab those, and you can, there we go, cycle the bolt open. And it does lock open on an empty magazine, which I have in it now. And as you can see, the ejection port is right in the top. So this kicks empty cases straight up. There is a button here, which allows you to manually hold the bolt open. So if I don't have a magazine, but I want to lock this open, I can pull this back, push the button, lock the bolt open like that. The sights are really not the strong point of the gun. They are this just simple U notch. There's a flip to it. So you've got a 75-yard notch or a 75-meter notch and also a 150-meter notch that shoots a little bit higher. Those are coupled with a flat-topped round front post right there. One neat feature of this, if you look closely, you'll notice that the front post is threaded into the front trunnion of the gun. However, the aiming point itself is actually eccentric. It's off-center on that threaded post. That is done so that you can adjust elevation and windage both simply by threading that front sight in or out. So you screw it in or out to adjust your elevation, and then to adjust your windage, you just rotate it through a 180-degree arc of travel left to right to put the sight exactly where you need it for your windage. The idea is the amount of travel required there is inconsequential in its impact on your elevation. So for elevation, you're going to be turning it in half rotation increments. And yeah, so something like a machine pistol, that's perfectly adequate. You'll find that on some other firearms designs as well, mostly submachine guns. Then we also have a pair of front sight protector ears right there, and those actually double as the retention springs for the folding stock. So this is a wireframe stock that is affixed to a dovetail here on the back of the gun, and this has a rotary hinge. To unlock it, you just squeeze the 2 wings together like that. That unlocks the hinge there. This is a wire stock. The stock unit is dovetailed into the back of the lower receiver assembly. And then we have this rotary hinge. In order to unlock the stock, you simply squeeze the 2 parts together. That unlocks it, allows you to fold it up. Comes all the way over the top of the gun. And then snaps in place over those front sight protector wings. That keeps the stock nicely out of the way. It does not interfere with your sight picture because the sights are right in the center, and then the butt plate, such as it is, nests over the barrel. That is also why the stock is so short. That stock is as long as it possibly can be without coming in front of the muzzle of the gun. So it doesn't extend the overall length at all. So if you want the sight picture here, it's kind of typical for a pistol, but not superb. There are going to be compromises that you have to make to have a full auto compact machine pistol, and sight and accuracy are kind of one of them. All right, now disassembly. In order to take this apart, we want to have the stock extended. We need it on fire, either semi or full auto, and we want to, of course, check the chamber and then drop the bolt. So we want the bolt down. Now, all you have to do is push out this pin at the front. Goes across to there. We'll push that and pull it on that side. And then your upper assembly is going to slide forward just slightly, and we can rotate it all open, like so. Once it's open, now we can take the bolt and recoil spring assembly out. By the way, this assembly stays together. So this is an elongated hole, and when the pin is out, this can travel back and forth. When the pin is in, it locks these pieces in their assembled position, so slightly backward. That's with the pin out. That is assembled, and when you put the pin in, it holds it there. But this allows us to disassemble the gun without actually having the pieces come apart, without having the pin come loose, so there's nothing that can fall on the ground and get lost. Anyway, you will notice that the slots for the bolt handles are slightly enlarged at the back. This is farther than you can pull the bolt back when the gun is assembled because the recoil springs are compressed too tightly. So we're going to pull the bolt back to here, and then these two little bolt handle knobs can come out. There's that one. Oh, cool, and the other one just fell right out. That's perfect. I suppose those little bolt handle knobs could get lost, but, well, nothing's quite perfect. Now we can just pull the bolt and recoil spring assembly out the back of the frame. Looking more closely at the bolt assembly, we have a dual recoil spring, dual guide rod assembly here. These springs are held on by this cap at the back. I'm going to leave that in place for the moment. Breech face is here with an extractor on top and, of course, the ejection port on the very top. This is hammer fired, so it does not have a fixed firing pin. It fires from a closed bolt. This is a very well-behaved gun. There's our firing pin on the back. And you'll notice there is a hole here with a little sear-like notch. That is for the rate reducer, and that's an important and clever and interesting element to this gun. So we'll come back to this in just a moment. The one last thing I want to point out is that the breech face is only about 60% of the way forward in the bolt. This has what's typically called a telescoping bolt, although it isn't actually telescoping, it's more like overlapping, where the barrel actually comes all the way back inside here. So the front end of the bolt is actually wrapped around the rear end of the barrel. The famous gun that does this is the Uzi, but there are a number of other examples. It was originally actually designed by the Czechs shortly after World War II. The idea here is this allows you to have more mass to the bolt without making it longer in the back and requiring a longer receiver. You can kind of see that in the receiver here. If you look down, you can see that the barrel sticks back in the receiver, well, just as far as the bolt sticks forward from the breech face. And yes, this gun is quite dirty inside. It's been shot a lot. Now the back end of this receiver has a lot of stuff going on. We have two elements here. We have the rate reducer back here, and we have the fire control group here. So being hammer fired, it's kind of impressive that they found room to put a whole fire control group inside this little bitty receiver. So let's see, we are on full auto, so I have to depress the auto sear. This is a safety that would release the hammer when I'm holding the trigger down. There we go. So if I hold the trigger, when the bolt cycles back, it's going to recock the hammer. And then you don't want the hammer to fall before the bolt is all the way in battery. So that's why you have this little guy. When the bolt goes forward, it's going to depress this. Let's see if I do it from this side. Once that goes down, that acts at, think of this as a secondary trigger. So in full auto, this is your primary trigger when you want to fire. That's going to fire the gun, bolt comes back, recocks. Now I'm still holding down the main trigger, but in order to delay firing until the appropriate point in the cycle, we have this lever up here, which acts as sort of an automatic secondary trigger, for lack of a better term. If I switch this to semi-auto, then this gets clicked down and it's going to stay down while the bolt is forward. When I pull the trigger, same thing's going to happen, except in semi-auto, this no longer fires the gun. Okay, now on to the more interesting bit. The rate reducer here drops the rate of the gun from what would probably be about 1,000 rounds or maybe 1,050 rounds per minute down to about 850, which is definitely more controllable. And the way this works is you have a spring-loaded hook here. This hook catches in this back hole of the receiver, right on that sear notch. So when the bolt comes all the way back, that goes in there, and it's going to grab the bolt and hold it in position so that it can't go forward, because the bolt's going to hit this because of the force that it's coming back with. Let's see if we can get a better view of that. The bolt hits that, which pulls this hook down. Then we have a bunch of stuff in the grip. So I'm going to unscrew our grip assembly here. We have this plug-looking thing down here. That is going to come out, and it has its own spring right there. I can then pull the grip off, and now I've got this aluminum, well, it's sort of the grip frame, and inside it is a reciprocating counterweight. So we have a steel weight here that can slide up and down a bit. Now the spring here is going to nest inside there, and it's always pushing this counterweight up. So what happens is when this is all the way up, when the bolt hits the rate reducer here, the impact is going to throw this thing down inside this short little tube, like so. It's going to hit the bottom, it's going to reciprocate back up, and when it gets to the top, this is going to hit on the bottom of this bouncing part right here, and then the main weight is going to smack up, transmit all of its inertia through into this. This hook comes up, that releases the bolt, and then the bolt can go forward to fire again. You can very clearly see this happening in the slow motion of the gun firing. The bolt will come to the back, stop, then go forward, and then there's a very brief pause at the front when you have to wait for the hammer to fall, and then it will fire, come back, get hooked, stop, and then release and go forward and fire again. That is a really clever and very effective little rate reducing mechanism. So all of those little cool technical elements inside make the VZ61 really a remarkably impressive design, technically speaking. It was pretty successful. It certainly worked well for the Czechs, and they manufactured them for quite some time. It also proved to be popular with security elements, security forces, intelligence agencies in some cases, and unfortunately, terrorist organizations as well. The people who want to sneak around with a high volume of firepower available from a very small package have all kind of, or many, have gravitated towards guns like the Skorpion because it does offer that. So it's gotten a lot of negative association in the press, which is unfortunate given how interesting of a gun it is mechanically. Now, I think it's about time for me to find out just how practical it really is to shoot, and I'm sure you would like to see some cool high-speed video of shell casings coming straight out the top of this thing. So we are going to go ahead and take this out to the range. Stick around, we will be posting that video tomorrow. Should be pretty cool, and I'm really looking forward to getting a chance to shoot one of these. So big thank you to Marstar for letting me disassemble and show you, and then go out and shoot tomorrow, their Skorpion machine pistol here. If you're up in Canada, definitely check them out for all of your shooting supply needs. And also a big thank you to my supporters on Patreon. It's you guys that make it possible for me to travel to places like this and bring you guys guns like this one. So, thanks for watching.